Hey guys, this is Austin. Apple has made a lot of noise around privacy lately. They even bought a giant billboard in front of CES touting the iPhone is the only secure option. And you know what? They kind of have a point. But before we get started, this video is sponsored by LastPass. I've used LastPass for years and years at this point. Before, I had just a couple of passwords that I used everywhere, between Twitter, bank account, you name it. With LastPass, you don't have to write, remember, or reset passwords. It keeps all of your passwords safe and secure in a vault, and on top of that, it will even help you generate brand new super secure ones. And if you're using an iOS or Android device, LastPass can even autofill your logins in various apps or web browsers. Now that's all available for free, but you can also upgrade to LastPass Premium for $3 a month, which unlocks more advanced two-factor authentication options, as well as better abilities to be able to share out your logins to other people. Best of all, it works across basically all of your devices, including different browsers, laptops, desktops, tablets, phones, you name it. I legitimately use LastPass every single day, so if you need to upgrade your password game, definitely be sure to check out LastPass at the link in the description. And of course, huge shout out to LastPass for sponsoring this part of the video. Now on to the main event. So I want to start out by getting something out of the way. I've either been sponsored by pretty much every single one of these companies, or at least I have a current active relationship with them. Although based on how this video goes, maybe some of those relationships might not last. I totally get it, right? Privacy is not the sexiest topic, but I do believe that we live in an era where most people don't understand the level of data and privacy that they're giving up. Now, if you choose to do so, more power to you, but I really do think it's very much in your own interest to at least understand what you're trading off in exchange for all the wonderful things we experience on our phones and tablets and computers every day. It is easy to point a finger at Facebook for their general lack of privacy, security, or, well, many other things. However, I actually want to start this video by discussing Google. It's kind of incredible at just how thoroughly Google has spread across the entire internet. Of course, there's things like Google Search and YouTube, but most even other web pages have at least some kind of Google service bolted on. If Google decided to just disappear tomorrow, the internet as we know it would largely be broken. Don't get me wrong, I rely on Google for a lot, as I'm sure many of you do as well. I mean, I wrote up this video using Google Docs inside the Google Chrome browser, I use Google Search to do a lot of my research, and of course you wouldn't be able to watch this video without Google's good old YouTube. It should be no surprise that all of this data is stored to help serve ads to you unless you specifically opt out. And that actually brings us to the Google dashboard. Now there is a lot of stuff in here. I mean, of course we have our web and app history where it tracks you pretty much everywhere, location, which we'll get into in a second, but there's a lot of other information that they're always collecting. Now, I mean, this shouldn't really be a big surprise, right? We've all noticed that we've searched for, say, a random thing on Instagram and suddenly we have a deluge of ads all across the internet tracking us, but a lot of this is just because of how thoroughly we are being tracked by companies such as Google as well as Facebook. Their ad networks are absolutely massive. Combined, these companies have a near monopoly on the online ad market, which means that every single bit of data they can get is a serious amount of actual cash that these companies can provide. I mean, for example, a Google search ad, especially some of the really premium ones on the top, they can pay upwards of $10 per click. If they get a little bit of information on exactly what you're interested in to kind of make that click just a little bit more enticing, it can mean really, really big bucks. Nearly every site on the internet has some kind of tracker embedded. So whether that's an invisible 1 pixel by 1 pixel GIF, or maybe it's something innocuous like a Facebook like button, all of these things are absolutely there to help keep analytics and keep data flowing to these giant companies. Now I know this all sounds kind of paranoid and like, oh no, the sky is falling, it's all terrible, but this is real stuff. And while it might be worth the trade-off for a lot of people, I think there's a ton of people who also just don't even realize that any of this stuff even exists. Now all of this tracking talk brings us straight back to Apple, who are doing something that is pretty much undoubtedly good for everyone. Well, at least everyone who uses Apple products. Inside Safari, they have some very strong anti-tracking policies. Intelligent Tracking Protection does a pretty decent job of blocking unwanted cookies, deleting old stuff that you're not using anymore, and importantly trying to keep third-party websites from tracking you all across the internet. Now it is certainly not perfect, however it is a good first step toward giving you a little bit more privacy when you're browsing the internet. Now Apple are by no means the only company who are heavily investing in privacy. Mozilla, the makers of Firefox, have long had this been one of their major core tenets. However, Apple has the unique advantage of creating not only the software but also the hardware, and that gives them a lot more freedom to not have to worry about things like an advertiser pulling out and ruining your entire company. Unlike a company such as Google, who funds Android as well as Chrome OS through services such as Search as well as Gmail, Apple primarily makes their money through selling devices and all the things that go along with that. such as selling apps, as well as subscriptions to things like Apple Music and iCloud. Now, it might sound like a small thing, but this makes all the difference in how these companies work. Take Maps, for example. If you enable location history in Google Maps, which it is constantly bugging you to do, you do get a lot of very legitimately useful features. It might give you a notification when it's time to head to the airport, maybe when traffic is bad, maybe when it's time to go and check out that new waifu convention that Ken's always talking about. But the problem is all this information is stored on Google services. So I've turned off my location history on Google a couple years ago when I first actually started thinking about doing this video, but there's still a ton of information that's still saved in here. So you can see I used to spend a lot of time in Alabama, I used to live in Missouri. If we actually zoom in to where I am now, you'll see that there are a ton of different little pop-ups of various places that I've been in the area. For example, you can actually zoom all the way in and pretty much see where I used to live in Pasadena. And look at that, that's like, I was everywhere. So November 20th, 2016, you can see that I walked to 24 Hour Fitness, I walked to Whole Foods, apparently I drove back, and then I went to ArcLight Theaters later that day. All of this stuff is super granular, and this is just a single day. All this data is absolutely searchable for the entire time that you had this turned on, and I bet that if you're like the majority of people, you've had it turned on for a while without maybe even realizing it. Now, all of this stuff is private to you. However, it is also, of course, stored on Google services, and there have been multiple cases where the police have asked for a copy of this data, which Google, of course, has to provide. If you don't save it in the first place, you don't have to worry about being tracked the last time you went to the Roxy Hotel in New York City, which apparently was October 26th, 2016. I hate how this video makes me sound paranoid, but this is weird, right? I shouldn't be able to look up exactly what I was doing on October 26th of 2016. See, from minute to minute when I walked somewhere, I got into a car, I got into a plane, like that just to me feels like it's a little bit more than I'm comfortable with. In comparison, I actually do leave Apple Maps tracking turned on, and that's for a couple of key reasons. First of all is that while Google just stores all this stuff behind your password, Apple actually doesn't even have access to it. So a lot of the heavy lifting is actually being done on your device, which is maybe not the fastest way of doing it, but it is a whole lot more secure. And the other stuff that actually is sent into Apple servers is sort of all randomized through a process known as differential privacy. This is a very secure way of making sure that no one has access to your data, and yet things like sort of location services and everything for traffic is still actually up and running. Some really clever stuff, and especially considering how much they do on device, I've got to give them props. Now, generally speaking, the result with Apple location actually isn't as good as what Google offers, but I'm happy to make that compromise because I know that my data is on my device and inside of my control. This same concept explains a lot of the differences between Apple and Google. For example, Siri, as we all know, is well, just not quite as good as what Google offers. However, a big part of that is because, again, you're not keeping all of that data stored in the cloud, whereas with Google as well as Amazon Echo, it absolutely is. And this is actually kind of the creepy part. So if you go into your data and personality page, and you open up voice and audio activity, you can pull up an active log of every single time you've ever spoken to your Google Home, to your phone, anything like that. So if I pull on, say, last night.
Hey Google, turn off all the lights.
That's creepy.
What?
That's creepy. I can literally pull up, so let's see here.
Hey Google, turn on the master.
Every single time you've ever spoken to your Google Home, it is recorded exactly what you have to say. Now, I understand why they do this, right? I mean, in theory, it's to help sort of train the algorithm to better listen for your voice. I mean, some of this stuff is just creepy. Now, all of these Google Assistants and Amazon Echoes and even the HomePod theoretically only turn on their mics and start sending recordings as soon as they hear their trigger words. But you can very easily imagine that the Google says, oh, I think I heard OK Google, and it starts listening in on a very important conversation. In fact, I feel like if I search through here enough, I'll probably see something that's a little sketchy.
Hey Google, play the sound of rain.
Like, this is creepy, man. And don't think that Google's the only one who does this. As far as I'm aware, Amazon does the exact same thing with the Alexa. But on the other hand, I don't believe that any of this stuff is stored by Apple in the HomePod because, well, first of all, no one's ever bought a HomePod, but also because they don't keep any of this stuff stored. It's all differentialized and kind of privacy protected and sort of all anonymized. If this is not a good example of why privacy is important, I don't really know what is, right? Now, there's totally reasons to give up this kind of stuff. I mean, as you can tell, even knowing all this stuff, I still keep Google Home in my house. But it is super creepy, especially when you don't understand what all this stuff is doing. There are dozens and dozens of other examples when it comes to privacy, but the way I like to think about it is like this. If you're using something for free, you are not the customer, you're the product. Now I want to be super clear. This is okay. Tons and tons of services that we use on a daily basis straight up would not exist without this core tenet, but the thing is you have to be mindful of what you're trading off in exchange. While I've mostly focused on Apple and specifically giving Google a pretty hard time, this issue applies to a wide range of companies. Of course, Facebook is about the bottom of the barrel when it comes to privacy, and companies such as Apple as well as Microsoft have had their fair share of issues as well. I really do believe that privacy is important, and whether or not Apple is investing in this for marketing purposes or for a legitimate good cause doesn't really matter to me. Now, I choose to trade some privacy for convenience, and I'll bet that the vast majority of you guys do as well, but I do think it's worth considering exactly how much you're giving up and when is the time to draw the line.